For the first time, we're seeing how far a plane skidded off a runway at NAS Jax into the St. Johns River with 142 people and several pets aboard, and passengers are sharing their stories of the late-night rescue.
We climbed onto the wing. We were in water. We couldn't tell where we were, whether it was a river or an ocean.
A GO team with the National Transportation Safety Board starting work to get to the bottom of what happened 20 hours ago. A critical part now recovered. Government investigators are examining the contents of this data recorder to get answers to their many questions. Booms surround the plane to contain any fuel leaking from the aircraft. Parts of the wreckage floating in the river near this family's backyard.
Our grandpa asked, what is that right there? And then our dad said, I think it's an airplane part. It's part of the airplane.
Right now, first-hand accounts of what the base commander at NAS Jax calls a miracle and local expert insight into what may have gone wrong.
News 4 Jax starts right now with a breaking news alert.
You are looking live from the Sky 4 helicopter flying over that plane, sitting in about 4 to 6 feet of water in the St. Johns River. And now a live look from our Marine 4 boat, giving us a really up-close view of the Boeing 737, which will remain in the water off NAS Jax until further notice. In the past hour, everyone, we have learned new information about the landing accident.
We've confirmed 22 people with minor injuries were transported to local hospitals last night, including 3 children. All have now been treated and released. One of those children was just 3 months old and spent the night at Wolfson Children's Hospital as a precaution. Here's what else we know. The plane landed at NAS Jax at 9:49 last night. It overran the runway, which is about 9,000 feet long and 200 feet wide. Right now, the black box from inside the plane is on its way to the NTSB lab in Washington. However, the cockpit voice recorder has not been recovered yet because it's in a section of the plane's tail, which is underwater. We just learned there were 4 pets on the plane, 3 of which are assumed to have died because of where their carriers were located in the cargo hold. The fate of the 4th pet is uncertain.
Now, this animation shows the type of plane that we're talking about, a Boeing 737-800. It's owned by Wells Fargo. It was built in 2001. It's operated by Miami Air International, which is a charter airline company that's based in Miami. We have several crews covering every angle of this developing story. We begin with News 4 Jax reporter Scott Johnson joining us live at NAS Jax, where the NTSB just released new information. Scott.
Jen, they just spoke to us in the last hour, really giving us an idea of what is next for this enormous effort on NAS Jax. Now, runway 10 will remain closed for the foreseeable future while they try and figure out, as you can see from these Sky 4 aerials of this plane, how it went off this runway during a landing during some bad weather. Was weather to blame? That is something they're looking at. There are no grooves on this runway. That's important because some runways have grooves on them designed to help during rainy weather. That wasn't the case here. Did weather play a role? We won't know until that black box, until that flight data recorder, that cockpit voice analyzer really gives us an idea of what went down here, how this landing could have overshot its estimation here at the end of runway 10 and wound up in the middle of the St. Johns. This plane will be in there for a while. We don't know what will be involved. They were talking about maybe getting some sort of flotation devices underneath it to raise it up out of the shallow water. It is sitting on the shallow ground underneath the water, which is mostly sand. So this is going to be a large effort to get this plane out of here. As we said early in the newscast, someone called it a miracle. You could say that because 142 people on board, not one person died. Such good news here in that regards. As we mentioned, 3 pets deceased. 1 likely made it out. It was in the cabin with the human, so they believe that the pet got out. Now the question is, why was this plane flying so low to the point where it overshot its landing spot here on the runway and wound up in the water?
We've got some challenges here because the aircraft, the bottom half of the fuselage, is covered with water. So we aren't able to get to all of the things that we need to get to. Cockpit voice recorder, which is the device that records The intra-cockpit conversation between the crew and also external transmissions with air traffic control is another matter. That is in the tail of the aircraft and is currently underwater, and we cannot get to it until the aircraft is moved.
One of the things that needs to be clarified in coming days, because this flight was coming from Guantanamo and it had been in Miami, this plane had, in recent days, and had flown around but made short trips to and from Miami. So the question was it undergoing some sort of maintenance in recent days? But this plane has never had a problem before. It's got a pretty clean record as far as we can tell. So that's part of the investigation. They believe, since they have the black box, the flight data recorder, headed to Washington, D.C. now, if it's not already there, they should get some answers pretty quickly. But this will be a lengthy investigation in the long run. They've already talked to the flight crew. Now the big question is, how do they get it out of the river? We will know that answer in coming days. We are live at NAS Jax. Scott Johnson, Channel 4, the local station.
Scott, you were, of course, at the news conference involving NTSB and others who were there. And it was interesting, as you pointed out, all of our ears perked up when we heard that this runway did not have grooves in it, suggesting perhaps this is an issue of rain on the runway and there was sliding involved. But the captain of NAS Jax actually came up and addressed that specifically and does not believe that a wet runway was really involved with this accident.
That is true. And Jen, I did talk to him about that. I also talked to him about an issue with NAS Jax. You know, is it remain open for business? This is a big issue that happened. You got tens of thousands of people who work on this base throughout the week. I said, can these people still come to work? The base is still open. The investigation is really relegated to runway 10, so that will be an issue they continue to look at. But the Naval Air Station is open for business. No real change there. I wanted to point that out because that is an important thing for a lot of people who work in this area. Big military town, so of course a lot of people wondering about that as well. Jen?
Important information, certainly, Scott, and also to mention that the runway itself had been renovated back in 2016 and crowned to allow for that water to run off during heavy rain. Scott Johnson joining us live from NAS Jax. Thank you.
Parts of the wrecked plane are floating in the river, and a family who lives nearby grabbed a piece of it today. Here's a photo of their twin sons holding what they pulled from the river. They spoke with News 4 Jax reporter Corley Peel this afternoon. Corley, what did they tell you about their find?
The family tells me this home where they found this part of the wreckage is just about 5 miles north across the river from where the plane went into the water, and right along this bank is where they say they found the wreckage. 10-year-old twins Jonas and Henry Wilson say they were walking along their grandma's dock with their family when they noticed the washed up wreckage. Once they took it out of the water, they realized it was likely from the Miami Airjet that slid off the runway and into the river at NAS Jax. The wreckage is blue with a large white 732 number on it, and a sticker on the back of the part gave them even more proof that the part was likely from the plane.
Our family was walking down the dock. On the way back, our dad noticed it, and then our grandpa asked, what is that right there? And then our dad said, I think it's an airplane part. It's part of the airplane. And then we grabbed it out of the water, and then...
I did.
We did.
I did. It looks sort of like a boat, but then when we picked it up on the other side, there was a airplane number 737, which is, we know it's a plane that crashed yesterday.
The family says they are working to find out who they can contact about their discovery. I reached out to FAA and it told me if you find parts like this, you're urged to call your local law enforcement and they can give it to the right people who are investigating this plane incident. Reporting live from Lakewood, Corley Peel, Channel 4, the local station.
Corley, you've been able to find out what that thing is, what part of the plane it might be?
Well, it's still unclear where this part goes to on the plane, but we did look at some photos online, and it appears that it might be from the nose landing gear door, the door where the front wheels come down on the plane.
Thank you, Corley.
Within the past few hours, we learned critical new details from a first responder source about exactly how rescuers got all 142 people off that plane. That source described it as chaotic. In fact, some passengers had children with them.
News 4 Jax reporter Brittany Jones is joining us live. She spoke with a source of hers who said this was no easy rescue, Brittany.
Yes, Tom and Jen, I spoke to one of my sources who's very close to the NAS Jax Fire Department, which is just across the river here where you see the plane is right behind me. My source says it was a difficult task, but they were definitely prepared. Now, I'm told the firefighters had to put rafts in the water to grab the passengers and the crew from off of a wing of the plane, put them inside a raft, pull them to the shoreline, then assisted them off of the rafts onto the rocks to bring them to safety. Now, my source described the scene as chaotic, as you said, dealing with so many people at the time. NAS Jax fire crew had about 20 members helping out. I'm told there wasn't any luggage in the water, but of course, we know that fuel is a concern.
Brittany, what about the pilot? Is your source giving you any information about that pilot?
Well, Jen, I found out that the pilot was the last person off of the plane, wanting to make sure that everybody was rescued and cared for. Right now, I'm working to find out how long did it take for them to rescue those people off of the plane.
Brittany, how about these flights? How often do they go between Guantanamo Bay and NAS Jax?
Well, Tom, we're talking about anywhere between 2 to 3 times a week. That's at least every Friday, I'm told, and every other Tuesday. That's between Cuba, Virginia, and Jacksonville. Now, it's a chartered Boeing 737 owned by Wells Fargo and operated by Miami Air International. The company's website says the airline provides charter flights to professional sports teams and the government. Right now, we're live in Beauclair, Brittany Jones, Channel 4, the local station.
Thank you, Brittany. Still ahead, News 4 Jax aviation analyst Ed Booth is here with us, giving us his perspective about what's next for investigators now that they have recovered the black box.
Plus, red flags about the plane's altitude on its flight to Jacksonville and its speed during the landing. And here's a live look from Sky 4, the Boeing 737 sitting in shallow water in the river. Our coverage continues next.